What happens when the person you love isn't real? When every word they've whispered, every promise they've made, every moment you've shared, was built on a foundation of lies. How well do we really know the people we let into our hearts, the ones we trust with our secrets, our bodies, our futures? And what happens when the mask finally slips, and you realize you've been living with a stranger all along? Some lies are small, white lies, protective lies. But some lies destroy everything they touch. This is the story of a love that crossed continents, a romance that began with a single message, and a deception so profound, so calculated, that it would end in an act of unthinkable violence. March 14, 2019, Dubai Marina, 4:47 a.m. The call came in just before dawn. A housekeeper, arriving early for her shift at one of the luxury high-rises overlooking the Persian Gulf, found something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. A young woman, 28 years old, African-American, lying motionless in a pool of blood in a penthouse apartment that wasn't hers. She'd given birth less than 48 hours earlier. The baby was gone, and the man she'd flown halfway around the world to be with had vanished without a trace. Welcome to True Crime Stories, where we dive deep into the darkest corners of human nature, exploring the psychology behind the headlines, the lives behind the crimes, and the truth behind the lies. If you're drawn to stories that challenge everything you think you know about love, trust, and betrayal, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we release new investigations every week. And if this story affects you the way it's affected me, leave a like to help others find it too. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Her name was Shanice Williams. Born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, middle child of 3. Her mother worked as a nurse. Her father was a postal worker who had passed away when Shanice was just 16. By all accounts, she was the kind of person people gravitated toward. Warm, genuine, the friend who always showed up, the daughter who called home every Sunday. She'd studied communications at Georgia State University and graduated with honors. Worked in social media marketing for a tech startup in Atlanta. She was good at what she did, really good. She specialized in building brands online and creating connections, making strangers feel seen. Maybe that's why she was so good at recognizing when someone saw her. It was September 2017 when she first received the message on Instagram. A simple comment on one of her posts, a photo of her at Piedmont Park during sunset, laughing with friends. Your smile could light up the entire sky. She almost didn't respond. She got messages like that all the time, but something about this one was different. When she clicked on the profile, she didn't see what she expected. No shirtless gym selfies, no club photos, no red flags. Instead, she saw art, architecture, photos of stunning Dubai skylines, glimpses of a life that seemed refined, cultured. The bio was simple: architect, dreamer, believer in meaningful conversation. His name was listed as Khalid Al-Rashid. She responded with a simple thank you and a smiley face. That was all it took. Over the next few weeks, their conversations deepened. He told her he was 34, born in Dubai to a prominent family. His father had been in real estate development, hotels, luxury residences, and commercial properties across the UAE. He'd studied architecture at the American University of Sharjah and had worked on some of Dubai's most iconic buildings. He sent her photos, not just of himself, though he was handsome with dark eyes and a warm smile, but of his world, the projects he was working on, sketches of buildings, sunset views from his office. He asked about her life. What were her dreams? What kept her up at night? What made her feel alive? Most men in her DMs wanted one thing. Khalid seemed to want to know her soul. I've never met anyone like you, he wrote one night. In a world of shallow connections, you're deep water. Shanice felt herself falling. They moved from Instagram to WhatsApp, then to video calls, hours-long conversations that stretched into the early morning, him in Dubai 8 hours ahead, her in Atlanta staying up way too late, not caring about work the next day. He told her he'd been raised in a traditional family, but had always felt different, more open-minded, more curious about the world beyond his own culture. "My family has expectations," he said during one late-night call. "They want me to marry someone they choose, someone from the right family, the right background, but I want something real. I want love." Shanice understood. She'd grown up in a tight-knit black church community. She knew about family expectations, about tradition, about the pressure to fit into a certain mold. "I left the church a few years ago," she confided one night. "My mom still doesn't understand. She thinks I've lost my way. But I had to find my own path, you know. I had to figure out what I believe, not what I was told to believe." "That's brave," Khalid said. "Most people just follow. You chose to think for yourself." For the first time in a long time, Shanice felt truly seen. By January 2018, just 4 months after that first message, Khalid asked her to visit Dubai. He wanted to show her his world and prove that what they had was real. Shanice was nervous. She'd never traveled internationally alone, never been to the Middle East. Her friends warned her to be careful. Her best friend Tanisha expressed concerns about meeting someone she didn't truly know. But Shanice felt certain. They'd video called dozens of times. She'd met some of his friends over FaceTime. He'd sent her flowers for her birthday, real, physical flowers that showed up at her door in Atlanta. This was real. She booked a 2-week trip for February. Khalid arranged everything. First-class ticket, a room at the Burj Al Arab, an itinerary packed with experiences, desert safaris, private yacht trips, dinners at restaurants she'd only seen in magazines. When she landed in Dubai and saw him waiting at arrivals, holding a bouquet of roses, everything else fell away. He was real, the connection was real, the love was real. Those 2 weeks were a dream. He was attentive, romantic, respectful. He introduced her to his friends, other young professionals, expats and Emiratis alike. They welcomed her warmly. He took her to his office, showed her the projects he was working on. He talked about a future where she could move to Dubai, continue her social media work remotely, build a life with him. On her last night in Dubai, he told her he knew it was fast, but when you know, you know. He wanted her in his life, not just for a visit, but forever. She flew back to Atlanta with her heart full and her mind made up. This was the man she was going to marry. Long distance is hard. But for the next several months, Shanice and Khalid made it work. She visited again in May. Then he flew to Atlanta in July, his first time in the American South. She showed him her world. Her mother cooked Sunday dinner for them. Khalid charmed everyone. Shanice's mother expressed some concerns about the cultural differences and the distance, but Shanice remained confident. She believed love didn't see borders. By October 2018, they'd started talking seriously about next steps: marriage, kids, a life together. But there was a complication: Khalid's family. He explained they were traditional and expected him to marry someone from their community. If he brought home an American woman, particularly a Christian, they would disown him and cut him off completely. He told Shanice they needed to be strategic, that he needed time to bring his family around. In the meantime, he suggested certain details about her background and beliefs shouldn't be front and center. Shanice felt uneasy but tried to understand. She'd heard about honor cultures and families cutting off members who defied tradition. She didn't want to be the reason Khalid lost his family. She agreed to his plan. November 2018. Shanice took the test 3 times because she couldn't believe it. Pregnant. She'd been on birth control. They'd been careful. But here she was, staring at 3 positive tests, her hands shaking. When she told Khalid over video chat, his reaction was difficult to read. Shock, fear, then something harder to identify. He asked if she was sure. She told him she'd taken 3 tests. There was a long silence. He told her this changed things, that it wasn't about timing, it was about his family. They couldn't know about the pregnancy, not yet, not until they were married. If they found out he'd gotten a woman pregnant outside of marriage, especially someone who wasn't Muslim, the consequences would be severe. Shanice began to understand what she was to him, a secret, something to be hidden. He pressed on, telling her she didn't understand the pressure he was under, his family's reputation, his business relationships. Everything was connected in Dubai. If word got out, everything would fall apart. He asked her to come to Dubai, to have the baby there. He promised he'd take care of her and the child, but they needed to keep it quiet until he could handle his family properly. Every instinct told Shanice this was wrong. But she loved him, and she was carrying his child. She agreed to come. March 2019. Shanice arrived in Dubai 7 months pregnant. This time there was no first-class ticket, no Burj Al Arab. Khalid picked her up from the airport himself, but something was different. He was distant, distracted. He'd rented an apartment for her in Dubai Marina. Modern but modest, not the luxury she'd experienced on her first visits. He explained he couldn't be seen with her while she was visibly pregnant. People talked. Word would get back to his family. They had to be careful. Shanice tried to understand. But as the days turned into weeks, she saw less and less of him. He'd visit late at night, stay a few hours, then disappear before dawn. When she asked where he was going, he cited meetings, projects, family obligations. She was alone in a foreign country, heavily pregnant, with no friends, no support system, no one to talk to. Her phone became her lifeline. She talked to her mother and Tanisha back home, but she downplayed how isolated she felt, how scared she was. She told them he was just busy with work, that everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. Khalid came to the apartment earlier than usual. He seemed agitated. He told Shanice they needed to talk. Shanice, now 9 months pregnant and exhausted, sat down heavily on the couch. He'd seen her Instagram. She'd posted something, an old photo from a church event. Shanice's heart dropped. She'd shared a throwback photo from her college days, a picture of her church youth group. It was nostalgic, innocent. She tried to explain it was just an old memory. But Khalid focused on the caption about faith, about how her church family had shaped who she was. Shanice reminded him that was years ago, that she'd told him she'd left the church. But Khalid's response was harsh. She told him she wasn't religious anymore, but she hadn't told him she was Christian. She hadn't told him she'd been baptized, that she'd grown up in the church, that her whole family was Christian. Shanice protested that it didn't matter, that she wasn't practicing anymore, that she hadn't been to church in years. But Khalid shouted that it mattered to him. Shanice had never heard him raise his voice before. He insisted it mattered to his family, to everyone in his life. He demanded to know if she understood what it meant if they found out the mother of his child was raised Christian. Shanice questioned his reaction, pointing out he was talking about her being raised Christian, as if her past was somehow shameful. Khalid accused her of lying to him. She maintained she hadn't lied, that she simply didn't think it mattered. He'd said he was open-minded. But Khalid's response revealed his true feelings. He thought she was secular, spiritual maybe, but not Christian. The way he said it made her blood run cold. Shanice asked quietly what was wrong with being Christian. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up and paced the room. He muttered that this was a disaster, a complete disaster. When Shanice tried to speak, he cut her off, saying he needed to think, to figure out what to do. Shanice asked what he meant by figuring out what to do, reminding him she was about to have his baby. He shouted that he knew. Then he turned to her, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that terrified her. It wasn't love, it wasn't even anger. It was disgust. He told her he'd come back tomorrow, and not to contact him until then. And he left. March 13, 2019. Shanice went into labor at 2 a.m. She called Khalid 17 times. He didn't answer. She took a taxi to the hospital alone. She gave birth to a baby boy at 6:23 a.m., 7 pounds 4 ounces, perfect in every way. She named him Noah. The nurses were kind. They took photos. They helped her hold him skin to skin. They asked about the father. She told them he was coming, that he was on his way. But he wasn't. It wasn't until late that evening, more than 12 hours after Noah was born, that Khalid finally showed up. He didn't hold the baby. He barely looked at him. He told Shanice they needed to leave. The hospital had her registered under her real information, her passport, her religion listed as Christian. If his family saw this, there would be consequences. Shanice protested that she'd just given birth, that she couldn't leave. But Khalid insisted she could and would. He had a private doctor who could check on her, but they needed to get her out of there immediately. Against her better judgment, weak and exhausted, Shanice agreed. Khalid signed the discharge papers. He'd arranged for a private car. They went back to the Marina apartment. He told her he'd come back in the morning and to get some rest. And once again he left. March 14, 2019, 2:30 a.m. Shanice was woken by the sound of the door opening. It was Khalid, but this time he wasn't alone. There was another man with him, tall, silent, standing by the door like a guard. Shanice sat up, instinctively pulling Noah closer. She asked what was going on and who the other man was. Khalid's face was stone, cold, unrecognizable. He told her calmly that he'd made a decision. When she asked what kind of decision, he explained that this situation couldn't continue. He couldn't have a child with her. He couldn't have his family find out about this about her. Fear flooded Shanice's body. She asked him what he was saying. He told her he was taking the baby, his son. The child would be raised properly in his faith and his family. The boy would never know about her. Shanice protested that he couldn't do that he couldn't just take her baby. His response was chilling and simple. The baby was his son. Shanice cried out that the baby was their son. She stood up, backing away, Noah crying now in her arms. She begged Khalid not to do this, pleaded that they could figure something out. Khalid demanded she give him the baby. She refused. The other man moved forward. Shanice screamed no, begging them to stop. What happened next would haunt investigators for months. The neighbor in the next apartment would later tell police she heard shouting, crying, a woman begging, then silence. By the time the housekeeper found Shanice the next morning, her body had already grown cold. The baby was gone. Khalid al-Rashid was gone. And the truth would prove even more horrifying than anyone imagined. When Dubai police arrived at the scene, they immediately launched a manhunt. But here's what they discovered. Khalid al-Rashid didn't exist. The name was fake. The company he claimed to work for, fabricated. The office he'd shown Shanice, a borrowed space from a real architecture firm where he'd briefly freelanced. The man Shanice had loved for nearly 2 years was a ghost. His real name was Tariq Hassan, 39 years old, not from a prominent Emirati family at all. He was the son of a lower middle-class family from Sharjah. His father had been a taxi driver, not a real estate mogul. Tariq had spent years crafting a fake identity. He'd created social media profiles filled with stolen photos of actual luxury developments, claiming them as his own work. He'd rented expensive cars for photo shoots, borrowed friends' apartments for video calls. He was a con artist, but this wasn't about money. This was about control, about power, about his deep-seated hatred for Western women, particularly black women, particularly Christian women. Investigators found his real social media accounts he'd kept hidden from Shanice. They were filled with misogynistic rants, racist rhetoric, religious extremism, posts about the corruption of Western women, about how they deserve to be punished for their sins. He'd done this before. Not the killing, but the manipulation, the lies, the targeting of vulnerable women online. Shanice was his fourth victim. The others had been emotionally devastated, but had escaped before things turned physical. Shanice was the first he'd gotten pregnant. And she'd been the first he'd murdered. Dubai police issued an international warrant. Interpol got involved. Security footage from the apartment building showed Tariq leaving with a wrapped bundle at 3:47 a.m. on March 14th. Airport records showed he'd booked a flight to Pakistan using yet another fake identity. He'd planned this, every step of it. But he made one mistake. He used his real phone, his personal device, to call a family member in Sharjah and tell them he'd handled a problem. That call was traced. Pakistani authorities, working with Interpol, tracked him to a small city outside Lahore. On April 3, 2019, 3 weeks after Shanice's murder, they found him in a rented house. He was arrested without incident. And baby Noah, he was found unharmed, being cared for by Tariq's cousin, who claimed she had no idea the child had been taken from his murdered mother. Tariq Hassan was extradited back to the UAE to face trial. The case drew international attention. The details were too horrifying, too shocking to ignore. In court, Tariq showed no remorse. He claimed Shanice had deceived him, that she'd hidden her Christian background, that she'd trapped him with a pregnancy. His defense argued cultural differences, religious conviction, temporary insanity. The prosecution laid out a different story. This was premeditated murder, a hate crime, the systematic elimination of a woman whose only crime was falling in love with a man who'd lied about everything. The evidence was overwhelming. In October 2019, Tariq Hassan was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to death. As of this recording, he remains on death row in Dubai, awaiting execution. Baby Noah was returned to Shanice's family in Atlanta. Her mother, devastated but determined, vowed to raise him with love and to tell him the truth about his mother, about how brave she was, how loving, how she traveled across the world for what she thought was love. Shanice's story sparked conversations about online safety, about the dangers of long-distance relationships with people whose identities can't be verified, about the vulnerability of women who fall in love with men from cultures they don't fully understand. But more than that, it forced us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Love can blind us. We see what we want to see. We believe what we want to believe. And sometimes, the person we trust most is the person who means us the greatest harm. Shanice Williams should be alive today. She should be raising her son, pursuing her career, living her life. Instead, she's another name in a growing list of women who have been murdered by men who claim to love them. Her story is a reminder that we must be vigilant, that we must trust our instincts, that when something feels wrong, it probably is. And it's a reminder that hatred, whether based on race, religion, gender, or culture, is a poison that destroys everything it touches. Shanice deserved better. She deserved the love she thought she'd found. She deserved a future. If her story teaches us anything, it's this. Real love doesn't hide. Real love doesn't demand you change who you are. Real love doesn't ask you to erase your identity, your history, your truth. Real love sees you, all of you, and loves you anyway. Rest in peace, Shanice Williams. Your story won't be forgotten. If this story affected you, please take a moment to like this video and share it. Shanice's story deserves to be heard. Subscribe to True Crime Episodes for more in-depth investigations into the cases that shock us, haunt us, and remind us of the fragility of trust. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. How can we better protect people in vulnerable situations? What warning signs should we all be aware of? And if you or someone you know is in a relationship that doesn't feel right, if there are secrets, lies, isolation, or control, please reach out for help. You deserve safety. You deserve truth. You deserve real love. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, trust your instincts. They might just save your life.